Welcome to another episode of Women in Focus. We are in the house of a very dear friend of mine, actually relative, and the person that I'm interviewing is their beautiful daughter. Her name is Nomita. I used to call her Susie. So I've known her all her life. She is a woman in focus today. Let's meet her. She is an amazing woman. You're going to love this interview. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Auntie. Thank you. How are you?
I am doing really well now that I am sitting here talking to you. So I'll call you Susie and Nomita both. So
Sure.
Susie, how did that name come about?
It's a funny story.
Yeah.
So you know my sister, Tina.
Yes.
When I was born, she said, "This is not your baby. She is somebody else's." And she was going to name me either Susie, Rose, or Cherry.
Oh, I see.
So out of the three, I suppose I should thank her. Susie is probably the best of the three. And so everyone
Cherry
started
wouldn't
calling me.
have been bad either.
Oh my goodness. Anyway, so they all called me Susie all my life. And when I went to kindergarten, I had this big monumental question.
Yes.
You have only one name you're going to be called all through your school years.
Yeah.
So which one is it going to be?
Right.
Susie or Nomita? And I picked Nomita.
You did?
I did. So in my professional career, my husband met me as Nomita, my children know me as Nomita, and they think it's very funny that most Indian family members and friends all call me a Western name. Usually, it's the other way around.
That's right. That's right.
People that are here that are from different ethnic origins want a Western name.
That's right.
I've always asserted I want my Indian name.
Okay, so Nomita is how you're known, right?
Yes.
You're a middle child.
Yes, but I will answer to both. And it's an endearing, loving term that my family and friends and family like yourself call me, so you can call me Susie if that's what you know me as.
So growing up, you were born in Canada, right?
No, I was born in Uganda.
Oh, you were
in
born
Kampala.
in Uganda. Oh, wow.
Only my brother was born here, so my sister and myself were born in Uganda.
And so was it at the time when there was problem in Uganda that you guys had to come to Canada?
Yes, that's a whole other interview, I'm sure. So you know that we lived right next door to Idi Amin Dada.
That's right.
And so when he became the president and overtook Obote by a military coup,
Yes.
we lived right next door.
And was it, as a child, I don't think you would have remembered any of that, but...
No, I tell people I have a hugely exotic international life, of which I remember barely anything.
Right.
Because I was only 4 months old.
Right.
That was in the early 70s.
Right.
And then we went to India, my mom and I and my sister on a holiday, and it ended up being a 2-year stay.
In India?
In India,
Right.
while my dad came to Canada, settled down, and got a job and sponsored us.
So you were almost 2 years old when you came here then?
Yes.
Yeah.
So my parents were geographically separated for that period of time.
So when you were growing up here, so really you're a Canadian kid, how was your childhood?
It was wonderful. But you know, what I would say is that seeing how hard my parents worked for everything that they had and what they gave up to come from Africa in that time to Canada and work from having barely anything, working, reaching success in their careers.
Right.
It taught us that no one is a victim of their circumstance.
Yeah.
They taught us that if you have the mindset to go for it, and you can achieve great things.
Right.
And so they set the bar very high for us, because we saw how they came here with hardly anything.
Yeah.
And how they have done very well for themselves, all through a lot of hard work and discipline, while placing us as a family first and foremost. So we grew up a family that had many, many social fun times with yourself, with your family. We were very aware of our background, our cultural upbringing, but we were also very assimilated here. When we went to school, I remember I had a teacher that said to me, "Oh, is English your second language?" And I was in grade 8, and I looked at her and I said, "No, is it yours?" And I thought, you know, people underestimate. They think you come from another place.
Yes.
Maybe you don't have the same academics or
Right.
or a proper foundation of English. Well,
Right.
you can appreciate this, being from Kenya and from England.
Right.
That even in Indians from India.
Right.
Some of those immigrants have better English than Canadians
Of course,
here.
yes.
So
Exactly. I want to talk to you about growing up, and then you were telling me about your kids. So I want to come to that slowly and gradually. But let's take a short commercial break, and then come back to you.
Okay.
Nomita is our woman in focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our woman in focus today is Nomita. Nomita, you are known, your last name, your maiden name is Bali.
yes.
So Balis and Dutts are a clan, you know. We'll talk about that one day.
I'd love to.
We're in the house of your mom and dad, and they have a parrot, and they also have dogs. So did you grow up with pets when you were young?
Yes, we did.
Oh,
So this African gray parrot
Yes.
was with us growing up, and then we
kidding.
acquired Bibi, his wife.
Yes.
Swahili name.
Yeah.
So we have two African gray parrots. But as
Wow.
you know, African gray parrots live for a long
How
time.
long do they live?
I don't know, but I would say close to my age.
Yeah,
So,
really? They are your age?
I know that we have had the African gray parrots since I was very young.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe 10 years old. We had it. I'm now 47, so
Yeah.
at least 37 years old is
Wow.
Murphy.
So they live longer than dogs, I guess.
Yes. And we have one dog in the house, which is my brother's, who occasionally comes and stays here in lovely White Rock.
So you are three brothers and sisters, right? Siblings. Older, Tina, and then you, and then Rikin.
Yes.
So all three of you went into three different professions. You're a lawyer by profession.
Yes.
How did that happen?
I think when I was young, I really enjoyed school. I didn't play sports. My brother did, and I would have liked to. But my dad said, "Your number one job is to do well in school."
Right.
And so that's what I did. So I joke with my children and I say, "You are elite athletes. I'm an elite academic." That was what I was told to do, and I was a people pleaser. I
Right.
wanted to do that
Yeah.
and do it really well. But I also sometimes would question, well, why is it that I'm not playing sports? Why am I not given that opportunity? And it's not a criticism, because parents want to do the very best for their
course,
children.
of course.
And they make choices that they think are best for their children. And I turned out okay. And I attribute a lot of who I am and my fortitude and my success to my family. But I would sometimes question things. And so I knew at a young age that I had one of those inquiring minds that really wanted fairness,
Right.
equality. And also, being the middle child, I would find ways to get out of trouble. So if I got into trouble by my parents, and my dad, as you know, was strict,
Yes.
I would find ways to eloquently get myself out of trouble by making almost submissions, if you will, as to
Yes.
why I shouldn't be punished, and that I really wasn't meaning to do something wrong.
Right.
So I think I was in lawyer training from a very young age.
Now I know.
Yes, and so to give you an example, I was, my parents, my dad said, your number one job is to be the best in school.
Right.
So what I did was I joined the sports teams in school.
Oh.
Without anyone knowing.
Okay.
And I still kept up my straight A's.
Good
And
for
I
you.
landed
Yeah.
I did okay in sports, but
Right.
honestly, at grade 9, 10, I was cut from all the teams because these other students were playing those sports outside of school. So
Right.
obviously they
And
had
you
more
were not,
skill,
yes,
and I
yes.
wasn't. So I understood that, and I accepted that. But when my dad found out, I said, "You're right. I am playing sports, but look, I still have straight A's." And then I thought, what can he do? He can't get mad at me. And I wasn't allowed to to talk to boys.
Right.
And so I
So that
ended
was
up
strict household.
very strict. So I ended up tutoring boys. So I would have an opportunity to talk with them. And I was not allowed to go to dances. And so I joined student government. Well, it's necessary as a member of the student government to participate in all the social events, including dances.
My God, you're a smart one.
So I was driven.
Yeah. And mom and dad sort of now know what you were doing, and at that time they did not.
They did, because I would advocate and say, well, I'm doing this, and this is the reason, and I'm still getting straight A's.
So at that time, was the legal profession more attractive to you, or were you thinking of going into teaching or, becoming a doctor? Because that's what Indian parents want. Engineer, doctor, lawyer.
Yes.
And
Well,
your dad is a sportsman.
yes, he is. And both my parents are teachers
Right.
by trade,
by profession. Yeah.
So education was very important.
Of course.
It was a given that we would all go to university, which
Right.
we all did.
Yeah.
I was one of those atypical kids that had a path that I decided for myself at a very young age and actually followed it. And usually people have an idea of what they want to do, and then they steer off of that path, and life
Right.
and intervening events make you change direction or path. That wasn't the case with me. So I remember watching Sunday night movies with my mom and being incensed at the injustice and watching cases. I remember one was Colin Thatcher. It was a Saskatchewan politician who was charged with murdering his wife. And I remember watching it and seeing how there was this possibility that he was trying to outsmart the justice system and bully his way out. And that did not sit well with me. And I remember saying to my mom, oh, I would love for someone like him to meet me on the other side, and I will outsmart him. And so I really felt this very strong case of justice and wanting to protect the public and to do the right thing and to take and do whatever it took to achieve justice, to do the work that's required to do that. So when I was 14, I decided I wanted to be a criminal prosecutor,
Right.
work with the police, and also at the same age, I was interested in politics.
Right.
So I decided that I would look into debating and maybe consider British Columbia Youth Parliament,
Right.
which is an opportunity for young students to go into the BC legislature
Right.
over Christmas break and debate.
Right.
So I had my eyes set on those two things,
And you
which
achieved
I
those.
achieved. Yes, I learned, and I can tell you a little later about the
Yes.
politics aspect
Yes.
of how I exposed myself to politics and
Right.
decided that was not my path. But Crown Prosecutor, I knew I wanted to do it, and I did that job, and it was my dream job.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that I had that opportunity.
To do it. I want to take a short break and come back, and let's talk about your political escapades and your legal profession. But let's take a break.
Sure.
Nomita is our woman in focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our woman in focus today is Nomita Bali. Nomita, you're married and your last name is?
Achadinha.
Achadinha. Where does that come from?
It's Portuguese.
Okay, so we'll come to that in a minute because you married a good-looking guy, and I want to find out.
Thank you.
I want to find out, with mom and dad being so strict, how did you get to that position? But before we do that, you mentioned that as a 14-year-old, you were looking at, I want to go into criminal law. I want to go into politics. How did that come about? The politic position.
My parents have always been people that
Apolitical
volunteer, apolitical,
Yeah.
but volunteer their
Right,
time. And
right.
they would always say, if you complain or criticize something, then be the difference. It's not enough to say, I'm not happy with this. Then
Right.
they would say, if you're not happy with that, then be the change, make the change, and dedicate your time to doing that.
Right.
And they would do that in many different ways, whether it was being good friends, helping their community. My dad was volunteer as a tennis coach. So they also, having my family, my grandfather worked as the financial advisor to Julius Nyerere
Right.
in Tanzania.
Right.
So, and my other grandfather was a doctor and volunteered many, many hours, did surgeries for locals. So I knew that politics, community service was something that my family is a large part of. And they instilled that in us. It's not enough to just do your work within your own, look after yourself.
Yeah.
You need to think about your community
Right.
and be part of the change. So when I was 14, I saw a program on the TV that said British Columbia there's British Columbia parliamentary pages, and then there was House of Commons parliamentary pages. The parliamentary pages are selected in grade 11,
Right.
and once you graduate from high school, it's a scholarship program. So at the time they picked 42 pages from across the country.
Okay.
And it was based on population. In British Columbia, they chose 6, and so they chose students to go to full-time university, and you would work in the House of Commons. I decided I wanted to do that. So I went to my high school counselor and said, I'm really interested in this parliamentary page program, and I would like you to help me with going through the application process. And she looked at me and said, I don't think you should bother. We've never had anyone from our school selected, and you're not bilingual, so they won't even consider you. Well, what she didn't know about me is the best way to motivate me is to tell me that I can't do something.
You can do something.
And I thought to myself, you don't even know me. And true, I'm not bilingual yet. So I went to my French teacher and said, what would it take for me to teach myself French and become as bilingual as I possibly can in a 1-year time period? And she said, well, it's a tall order, but I'm willing to help you. Here's what you have to do. Change your radio station to French. Start watching a little bit of TV in French. Read the Maclean's magazine, which talks about politics. Read that in French. And come visit me for half an hour once a week, and we're only going to speak in French. Now, if you can do that,
Yeah.
that'll get you started. So we did, and we started that for about a month. And she said to me, you're really doing all of that? And I said, yes, I am. She said, you really want this? Yes, I do. She said, well, then we're going to do an hour once a week. I think she was an extraordinary teacher because she saw my desire to do something, and she took her own time
Right. To help
to
you
help
out.
me. So I think we probably did more than 1 hour. I think she would just let me pop in, and we would converse. The application process starts with a random phone call from the selection committee
Right.
in your second official language. So they phoned me, and I know I did terrible. There was just no way that I did anything other than impress them.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I think I'm
failed
done.
in this one, yes.
But thankfully, the second part of the process was a test, which I knew I would do well at, because I've told you I was an elite academic.
Yeah.
So I did very well on the test, I think. Then the third part was that they did another phone call after they'd weeded out those that didn't do
Right.
well in the test component. And that time when they called me, it was probably about 8 months later.
Right.
And I was able to converse
Better.
better. I was able to understand what they were peppering at me in French. better, but I'm not sure I did really well. I'm just saying I did better. Then the final process, they flew to each major city in Canada in a boardroom, and they would speak English and French in the back
Same.
and forth.
Yeah.
And they wanted to see how quickly you could switch languages.
Right.
Because the parliamentary page program is really, you're delivering notes and water to members of parliament on the floor of the House of Commons.
Right.
It's more of a privilege to be selected and to be able to observe
Right.
democracy.
Yeah.
And
right there.
right in front of your eyes. But it requires you to be able to understand the requests that the MPs are asking you in their language. So that was very stressful. I remember
How long was that?
it was a 1-hour interview.
I see.
Well, we are going to offer you the position as a page, but you need to know you're not completely 100% bilingual. But we have never had a candidate that has advanced in their second official language as quickly as you have. So it demonstrated to us how hard you worked and that you really wanted
Right.
this opportunity.
Beautiful.
So we're going to give it to you, but you have to do a 6-week intensive immersion course in Chicoutimi, Quebec.
Right.
And you're also going to have to go to Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, which is a military base where they send cabinet ministers that need to work on their second official language. So that was an 8-week process before starting the PAGE program in September.
Wow.
And my roommate was a Quebecoise girl, so she and I were roommates, and I spoke to her in French the entire time when we were roommates, and she spoke to me in English, except when we fought. And then we chose our official languages, so we made sure there was nothing lost in translation.
Nomita, we could talk about your life for hours at end, and we haven't even reached to the point where I wanted to, but I have to take a break and promise that we should continue this interview.
Sounds good.
Nomita Bali is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.